Welcome to the Flowing State of BJJ podcast, episode number 8. Our guest today is Mark Spencer, a second degree BJJ black belt, as well as a black belt in many other martial arts. Mark has been in the BJJ game for a while, but more importantly for us today, he has over 2 decades of experience in coaching martial arts. Today we get a chance to see what being coachable is all about. Please join me in welcoming to the podcast, Mark. It's been a long time.
That's my friend, yeah.
I think the last time I saw you, apart from the comp on the mats, was when I came up to Fulling Kazan and you were still on Tunbridge Road. Yeah, and we had a couple of roles in there. So the topic of today is being coachable and coaching. Because as I run this academy, there's people who are not very coachable. So I thought, who do I know has been in the coaching industry for a long time? Not showing your age. I can give us some tips about being coachable. So what advice have you got for people coming into the martial art to just help them be coachable? Because I don't think it's a natural thing, right?
It's not, and like everyone's different as well. So like there's no prescribed way which works for everyone, because you've got different types of people who learn different ways. So you've got people who can learn just through describing a movement. They're straight away, they can kind of do the movement. You've got people who you have to physically move into that position, and you probably have to do it like 300 times. Like the amount of people that I've had come through who, you know, like lovely people, and no matter how much you tell sure that person, they just can't understand it. And it's only when you kind of physically move them into that role or into that position, like an armbar is a great example, because there's a lot of different factors that you need to consider, of kind of the arm control, the posture control, then cutting an angle. And just by saying that, for a lot of people, that's quite a lot of information to take in, and you have to have the context of what that actually means as well. So what does cut an angle mean? You know, as coaches, we can get quite frustrated, but we've got to remember that, you know, a lot of people, when they first come into an academy, like they've never rolled. They, you know, the first time on the back and they say, right, open your legs. You've got to think about that kind of journey for that person on day one. Like, what do you mean lie on my back and open my legs? Like this is something which should be very foreign to most people, to just accept that position of legs open with a big old smile on your face. So as a coach, it's our responsibility to kind of keep thinking like back to our first day, and keep thinking about kind of what we're asking people to do. And I think if we keep that in mind as well, that helps our coaching and coaching that person through their journey. Obviously, you know, like some people are quite, you know, they've seen like UFC. You don't really have many people coming in looking at kind of jiu-jitsu and wanting to do jiu-jitsu. You know, when people come into a gym, they say UFC, but they mean BJJ. And it's your job to show them that they don't want to get hit in the face. What they want to do is just roll around with the pals on the mat. And I think that's kind of the biggest barrier from the first part of coaching someone and getting someone involved in jiu-jitsu, martial art, or a sport. So the coachable question, I think that's the coach's responsibility, to make sure that they're framing the class and what you're teaching that person in the right way. To pass that on to another person and say, you're not coachable, it's his second day. Like, you know, tell him the story, tell him what we're trying to do, make him understand, make her understand. And then as people go through, that's when you really sort of see, is that person coachable? And then, because after you've kind of shown them the game and how to play the game, and then you're making these little refinements, that's where you find if someone's coachable or not, in my opinion.
One of the last classes I went with you were doing from a half guard, and I've never heard it described the way you described it, but it stuck with me. You said, we're going to do the old man sit up, and you did the leg swing and you sat up, right? And it's little things like that, which I was just like, wow. Like everyone says, underhook, connect your head, and start sitting up. But as soon as you said all man sit up, before you did that, I instantly knew like he's swinging the legs and what you were gonna do. Then you showed me, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. So where do you come up with these little ways to remember the moves?
I'm an idiot. I'm a certified idiot. So like we've got so many little kind of sayings for positions, and like so if I say chihuahua hump, right, you can mentally visualize a chihuahua humping someone's leg, can't you? Yeah. Okay, so somebody has stood up, you go into a knee bar position, and you need to break their posture. What do? You resemble a chihuahua humping a posh girl's leg, right? So it's things like that it's not the most PC way of doing it, but it helps kind of paint the picture of what you're trying to do, and it goes back to making things relatable. Like if you said something like break posture, like what does that mean? If you hump that leg like a little chihuahua humping a girl's leg, he'll fall over, and then that makes sense. And I think just from coaching so many different people, like I have absolutely no idea how many people I've coached over 24 years of coaching martial arts. And then before that, I used to coach junior rugby as well for like 4 years. And obviously I wasn't using terms like that to these little kids, things like that. But like a lot of my kind of, my career has been coaching adults and young adults as well. And I think that's it. It's our responsibility as coaches to make sure that we do make jiu-jitsu relatable to everyday, things and terms. And I think sometimes we get lost a little bit. So as you get deeper into jiu-jitsu, you get into kind of the Danaher style of, everything's now Japanese. It's I get it and I understand it, and I think there is a nuance, and it's good to kind of have that. But like if you're teaching somebody like outside Ashi or some other thing that that's now popular in jiu-jitsu because it sounds cool as well. So we've gone from being Brazilian, where everyone's pretending to be Brazilian, like boy, and all this, to now talking about kezakatamis and stuff like that because it's now cool. It's not helping new students. It's not helping people get involved in jiu-jitsu, and I think sometimes you have to take take yourself a little bit. You have to be silly with it to make it relatable, in my opinion.
So I get a lot of students who come in and they ask me the Japanese term, and they're like, "Oh, how do you do this?" And even though a lot of them I know, I'm like, "I don't know what you're on about. Tell me about it in English. Explain it to me." And one of the reasons I force them to do that is they're just using a term that they have no, like the Japanese. The reason why they use a lot of the terms is it's very descriptive of the move and it makes sense.
Yep.
In Japanese. We don't understand Japanese. So I'm like, no, describe what you're doing in English so you understand it better. Is there a difference between coaching adults and coaching kids? Because obviously not the terms that you were talking about earlier. You're not going to do that.
No. We changed a lot for the kids, so there's a lot of moves that we now have different names for, so that's definitely changed.
But in terms of breaking it down, because one of the things that I learned this a long time ago from one of my old coaches was break moves down into 3 to 4 pieces. And if the move requires more, do the first 3, do the next 3, do the next 3. Split it down like that. Is there any big differences between coaching the adults and coaching kids in terms of trying to relay that information?
So a lot of kind of what I've done has been with adults. And like I think there is a difference. I really do. Like we do have a kids class, and I've coached like the youth team for English youth team for quite a long time, but those kids are at such a high level, like you might as well be talking to an adult. Okay. But like young people who are coming into the gym, I'm not sure I do chunking. So like the kind of phases. So you do this, and it equals that. And I think that helps the introduction of the technique. And then kind of like obviously SPG, which is what I'm part of. There's the introduction, isolation, integration sort of method. So you introduce a technique, then you isolate it into that to drill in and kind of sparring in that particular area, and then you integrate it into the entire game. I like that, and that was one of the main things that really stuck with me. Back in 2005 when I was training with Matt through Combat Base and Darren and people like that. I think that whether you're an adult or a kid is really important because, again, it's putting things into context. It's painting the entire picture. It's showing the entire game, but still focusing on a very specific skill that we're trying to develop. As a coach, I'm always kind of reflecting and kind of looking at what I'm doing and how I'm coaching. I'm now quite lucky that I'm only coaching twice a week, so I get to go to lots of different clubs and learn lots of new ways of coaching. And there's a few things which recently has made me kind of go back and kind of think about not only teaching adults but kids especially. So kids, it should be fun, but like, what adult wants to go into a gym that's not fun? Like, I mean, let's be serious. Like, look at what we're dressed in. Like, we're dressed like samurais. We're cosplaying. we are, aren't we? So, like, if you're gonna, spend God knows how much money buying a gi and then go to a gym which is all matted and you're gonna roll around with your pals, it should be fun. Jiu-jitsu should be fun. Training should be fun. The big chunk of us aren't getting paid for it. So if you go into a really strict class and the sensei is like, "Oh, you will do this," and barking at you, it's like, "Oh man, this is getting a bit boring, isn't it?" Like, it should be fun, but I think chunking things helps. Keeping stuff relatively fun definitely helps, regardless of whatever age you are. And again, I think even adults, keeping it quite simple. So if you're teaching like a 5-year-old, chances are it's probably pretty similar for an adult as well, because especially early on when we're learning jiu-jitsu, it's complicated. It's really difficult. Like I'm like you. Like I've got a black belt in kickboxing, in traditional jiu-jitsu. I've got Eric Paulson, like he loves to use all the different Japanese terms for everything. Like I'm doing judo with Bradford Judo at the moment, and they're saying everything in Japanese. I'm like, what sweep? I don't know. Like, it's really, really tricky, but it's they're able to kind of describe it in a way that helps me understand, but doesn't make me feel silly for asking that question. I think as a coach, that's another thing that you should really be conscious of, is not making someone feel like they can't ask a question and don't feel silly.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
And it does.
Most of this will be me going off in weird tangents and talking about chihuahuas humping legs and Uji Daddy and all this. Anyway.
You mentioned there where you're teaching 2 times a week, and now you're training at lots of different clubs. Are you finding that lots of different clubs are coaching in different ways, or are they all pretty similar, as in, the warm-up, they do technique, they do that stuff? Is there kind of are you seeing themes in different clubs you're going to, or is it all just everyone's doing random?
So there's definitely themes. Like you've got the kind of traditional kind of warm-up, and then either some form of technique, whether it's drilling or the introduction to the technique, then you drill, and then integrating that into a live spar or a live drill. That definitely kind of follows the patterns. I kind of like, and I struggle with. Like I'm not very good at judo, and this is why I'm spending a lot of time with the Bradford Judo guys. I go over to Huddersfield Judo as well. When we start, I don't really get the grips, because like a lot of my time over the last few years has been spent kind of doing MMA, and gripping is really, really different. And like when we go into kind of the adult kind of more advanced class, the black belts, they're very, very good. And straight away when they grip, I'm like, I don't know if I'm winning or losing. I'm assuming because they've initiated the grips, I'm losing. And I think that would help a little bit with that kind of more isolation of the first part. So, one of the things that I do think about an awful lot is like, we've got such a wide scope of what we're trying to teach. So from standing, all the various different positions on the floor, that sounds quite simple, doesn't it? But like from standing, you do your judo throws, your wrestling takedowns, you can focus on your defensive stuff, you focus on the grips and disengaging, you can pull guard. There's all these thousands of different guards now. So like, how do we start from the very beginning? And that's the bit I'm kind of not seeing at the moment, is that kind of introduction to the first part of the game. And how do you do that with such a complex game as well? So this is something which I don't know how to solve that problem. But going to different clubs and new clubs and seeing how they slightly change their approach is giving me some ideas to kind of think about, like, how would I start from day one again as a new person? How would I learn all of jiu-jitsu? But typically the formats are pretty similar. The kind of warm up, and then the drill, and then some form of sparring. I don't know what would be how you do it differently. One of the things which I found really interesting, training with John Kavanagh when he came over to Cage Steel, like he actually he did like a little bit of a warm up and then made everyone roll at first, because he said, well, that's why you're all here. So get it out of your system. We did 20 minutes rolling and then we learned something. And I do think about kind of trying that and implementing that. And I have done that a few times as well, where you kind of get that out of your system, because a lot of the time you can see people when you're teaching them like, time to roll it, time to roll it, time to roll it. And that's something which I've done a couple of times. And
it's an interesting concept there, because when you do a warm up, you get warm. Then you start doing technique, and because it's not as high tempo, you start cooling down again, and then you're going back into the rolls. So it was all, and I've seen like we got someone who comes over to us and helps us on Fridays, and when we go into the BJJ part, he gets us rolling up front. He said, just roll, and then I'll show you technique at the end. Which is, you can see his pros. I do it the other way around. I do the warm up technique and then do the coaching, do the rolls at the end. So I think none of them are the right way or the wrong way.
So one of the things, like Jason Johnson, who's one of our coaches, like a brilliant guy, he actually sent me some about a week ago, and it was a video of someone talking around kind of learning and patterns of learning and things like that. And one of the other things which is I find quite interesting from this video, and it's a good point, like we tend to follow patterns with teaching as well. So as well as kind of structured patterns of kind of warm up, you do your technique, then you do your rolling. This lady, we're also sort of talking around, instead of just having focus on like doing armbar drills, so like set up an armbar, like you'll do an armbar drill, then do a leg lock, and then you'll do a throw. And that actually has been proven to, and I need to check this also, please don't quote me on this, but like that's been proven to help people learning. So even though it doesn't join, which is what I've always done, that kind of method of, just picking different random things and just drilling it together actually helps some students learn better. So like if you kind of combine that with your experience of the person who comes over on a Friday, my experience of training with John Kavanagh, like it's something I'm thinking about an awful lot, and like just changing the structure. Was it Apple? I'm sure it was Apple, where they wanted to increase productivity, and to do that, all they did is they went in and they painted the machines a different color, and then that actually increased productivity because people saw a change. They didn't understand what the change was for, why people have just painted this machine. There's no reason it should be a different color, which actually made people kind of work and pay attention more. So slight changes in your structure
are proven to help.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see how that would work in martial arts. So I've got a lot of time now, so this is the stuff I sit on thinking about. So I'm either thinking about security or cats or this.
As a coach, it's amazing. Like it's not just BJJ that you're concentrating on. Obviously, BJJs, you need to keep studying and recycling that. And it's amazing following you on Instagram. Like you're going to all these different clubs and you're still learning. But it's also the art of coaching as well that you got to study as well, because not everyone who's a BJJ athlete is a BJJ coach. There's a definite art about coaching as well, right?
I couldn't agree more. Coaching is a skill that you need to develop. So like I don't know how many courses I've done, through kind of IMAF. IMAF have got a really good like level 1 MMA course, and a lot of it isn't actually teaching techniques. It's talking around kind of concussion protocols, development of students, how to coach kids as opposed to adults. Part of the assessment, actually, you have to break down a technique. So like, it's not testing, armbar from this syllabus. It's like, it's testing that you can actually break down a technique and describe it. And as a coach, you can kind of one of the, I'm preparing for a competition at the moment. This is why I'm kind of dotting around a lot. But when I say I'm focusing on how the coach is talking, how they're describing things, their movement, because every level you can learn something, and it's, even if you spot something like, I don't really like that, you should always kind of challenge why you don't. You should always kind of go back and reflect. So I don't like that because, and if you haven't got a real reason, you should really sort of think about, like, why didn't you like that way, the way that person coached? Like, I went to somewhere a couple of, I won't say how long ago because it might give it away, but they were showing a technique, and I'm like, I would never do that. And then I started kind of playing around with the technique, and I just made myself do it the way that the coach did it, and it actually brought some different situations and some different options which I've never really considered. So I still don't think I'll implement it. I'm not sure I'll coach it, but it definitely made me rethink part of my game. And as a coach, like, you need to get out there and you need to learn. And I think that's something I fell foul of, because coaching is very selfless. You have to be very, very selfless, because people pick up on, like, on people who are not really into coaching and stuff like that. But you have to keep your development and your learning going on this. Everything gets better. Everything in the world gets better. You've got, I think this is one of the problems with martial arts, and this is where Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu doesn't really have this, but we tend to have more of an ego thing going on, where I do what Danaher does, so this is the best in the world. And people don't really reflect, well, actually, you don't coach the same, you don't have the same mindset, you don't have the same audience, where he's got the elite of the world. You've got, like, Timmy, who works in, like a bakery or something, like, he don't care about Japanese names, but, like, I think, traditional martial arts, they live in the past. And everything gets better, everything improves. Planes get better, cars get better, TVs get better, and I think not having that approach to martial arts seems quite stunted. And we always need to be evolving. Like, we look at jiu-jitsu and athletes evolve, but as coaches, are we doing the same? And this is part of the reason why, like, I've just gone down to 2 nights a week so that I can kind of go back and relearn and reassess just start learning again, because I think it's really important you have that opportunity to do that.
One of the big ways that I found helps me stay motivated is competing. So as someone who competes, I can't afford to not still be learning. That's why one of the big things is that I try getting coaches into the club. Because it's hard, as someone who's running a club, it's hard to go out because you're at the club every. So I'm like, okay, I need to get coaches in to try getting. I go out as much as I can, but get coaches in. So now I don't need to think about what I'm coaching today. You know what I mean? That's his problem. I'm gonna join in the class and I'm gonna be on the mats doing the same thing, because I can't afford to fall behind, because in X amount of time I'm competing, and they don't care. They don't care if you're a coach. There's not a coaches division. There is for us older guys in terms of masters and stuff, but there isn't a coaches division that they're going to take it easier because you haven't been training as much. You compete with everyone else. Yeah. You started competing more recently as well. You were saying you're getting ready for one, right?
Yeah, so I've done a couple of grappling. Well, I did catch wrestling last year, which was good. Definitely showed a lot of areas where I need to develop. So I really enjoyed that, going over to Wigan, doing some catch competitions. It was really positive as well, because one of the goals that I set myself last year was to hit foot sweep in competition. So, like that, I mean, like, I got smashed. Like, the competition went really, really badly. Like, it were, I was like a week after competing in Rome and doing kudo. So kudo is pretty much MMA with a helmet and a gi on, so you can rag each other around. I was oldest in my category. Came third, lost to the eventual winner by a point. Had 3 fights and I was broken. But I still went over and did the catch in the club, because I love the guys over at Snake Pit. I think they're brilliant. But yeah, even though, like, the matches didn't go my way, you've got to take those positive sort of moments of, like, right, I got a foot sweep, and I made up, because that were, January 2022. I'm gonna compete, number one, and I'm gonna hit a foot sweep. So I think as a coach, that is important. I'm not sure you need to test yourself. So like whether you go to competitions and do that, or whether you do it, I mean, really competitions. I mean,
But you can do there's different types of comps, isn't there? Even you go out and compete, or sometimes we hold a little integral because there are people who are just not interested in competing for whatever reason. And to try getting them guys to feel a little bit of the same situation, we'll just do an integral. I think just our four walls, just our boys, get them all together and do something like that. It's not the same.
It's not, and it's a really good point, and I think this is something which I let myself down quite a bit, through kind of focusing on coaching and focusing on people. I think as a coach, you've got to be really careful you don't get stuck into a couple of traps. So for me, there were two things that I think in reflecting on how much coaching I've done and how much I've spent giving to other people, and I think it's important you do. So just that's your job as a coach. But as a coach, your goals can't be reliant on another person's motivation. It can't, because on two fronts, it's not fair. It's not fair on the person that you're putting your goal on, and it's not fair on yourself because you're not actually developing for you. So I fell into that trap an awful lot. So like I focused on kind of coaching people for mixed martial arts over everything else, over my own development. I thought I was still developing as a coach, but you can't put your goals on someone else. So like if you'd have asked me like 10 years ago, my goal would have probably been still the same of coach someone to a UFC, but it really isn't fair on the person that you're trying to, and a lot of it comes from a good place. You try to help the person, you try to guide them, but like things happen, like that person may not want to do that anymore. And that's a bit of a trap as a coach. And don't fall for your own bullshit as well. Like go out and compete. Like I have always competed, through kind of all that stint of coaching, but I can definitely see where my progression has halted, and it has been because I've not been focusing on my own game and then going out and testing it. I think internal stuff is good, but it doesn't give you the same thing as going out there and just putting it on the mat. And I think your students appreciate it as well. Like I really struggle with kind of confidence and coaching. Like I can do a list of things that I've achieved over the years of jiu-jitsu, mixed martial arts. I can tell you all the belts I've got in all these various different things. I find it weird when people get excited about something I've done. I really struggle with that because I think it's that kind of coaching mentality where you're always kind of focusing on other people. So after Rome, like I've got this wicked video that I have to keep going back and visiting just to remind myself that I did pretty good. And and it's all these different teams as I'm walking off the mat hugging me after my third fight. So like I'd had my first fight, beat the guy, second fight against the eventual winner, Chechen lad, absolute beast. He cracked 2 helmets. So like I had to get to, like the helmets are really solid as well. Like we were just trading. He cracked first one, cut me, took it off, put another one on, went out again, scrapped again, cracked that one as well. Fought again, and then I came off, and then for the bronze, I beat a lad from Spain, and the Spanish people look at me. I'm like, but at the time, I'm like, this is weird. What's going on? Like, it's difficult. I think you just got to be careful as a coach that you don't invest so much into other people that you forget about yourself, and that's important. And like, your students do appreciate you going out there and competing and putting yourself in the same position as them, and I think that's really important. Obviously, like people get old, hurt, injured, that's fine. But you've just got to keep that challenge for you as well.
One of the things that happens in comps is you sat in the coach's chair, and it happens in the gym as well, but it happens a lot in comp. Is like, so you're shouting to the guy, right arm underhook, and he steps up on his left leg, and he's just like, that's not what I said. I said the other arm. Have you got any strategies for both sides? So obviously the coach knows what he's trying to say and he knows what he's trying to do. But for the guys on the other hand receiving, is there any have you experienced stuff like that?
Yeah.
You have, right? Like the other day there was someone here and I'm like, post out with your right arm. And he posted out with the left arm, got swept to his right. I'm just like if you'd posted, you would have been all right. So is there anything like that where you can just like tell people just learn your left and rights, man, and what your arm is and what your leg is?
So I think recapping. So afterwards, like, and you have to be selective when you try and coach after a loss or a win, after a competition. I think sometimes I see coaches grabbing people and like telling people off straight after, and that's it's not helpful. I don't think. There are some people who want feedback straight away, and if they want feedback straight away, you wait for them to ask for it rather than just give them, yeah, like I usually give a couple of days. I'll say, all right, don't worry, you've earned your pizza and stuff tonight. I've have a night off, have tomorrow off, and come in Monday and we'll have a chat about it. And then kind of going through, I think video is probably the easiest way, because sometimes just, again, we go back to that, you're describing things which I barely remember any of my fights. And, if you ask me, if I didn't watch the fight, I couldn't tell you what happened. It's one of those where, like, having that visual stimulus of, right, do you see when I said you put that left hand out? I said, yeah, I told you to put your right hand out. What happened there? And do it in a way that's constructive, not telling off as well. So this goes back to coaching skills and having coaching skills as well. So understanding kind of how to feed back information, because at the end of the day, we all want our students to improve. And like I said, like if your goal's based on this other person doing a thing, then you're putting all that pressure on that person to do it. So that's where you have to be really careful. And, it's not meant as a selfish thing, but it can be. So like you need to put things into perspective of like, okay, you put your left hand out. Why did you put your left hand out? Oh, I didn't realize I did that. All right. So if we get in this position, which hand's going to feel better? And then, just coach them through it, talk them through it, and then actually physically put them in the position and do that with the person, so they get that physical stimulus as well of understanding what it felt like to be in that position and what would happen if they did the right thing. I think that helps, but some people don't listen. Some people, no matter what you do, they don't listen. Like, I've had a few kids come through at the time, and lovely people, but like when that red mist goes, it's like, I'm not even going to say, oh, I've sat back. There's been a few people, not because they're not trying to listen or they're doing something negative. It's just the red mist goes, and then boom, some demon possesses them, and then hell opens up, and it's just like, just right hand up. Oh, it's like, just do, yeah, otherwise you're just losing your voice for no reason. But yeah, it's tricky. It is tricky. And I think this is the evolution for kind of combat sports, whether it be Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, mixed martial arts, or whatever you do. We've got to look at other sports and how they prepare. So, often, there's a real pattern in Jiu-Jitsu at the moment where really hard sparring and really, going after it and, ripping stuff on, that kind of sparring is quite popular at the moment. And, you look at like top flight sports like, American football, they're not playing a full game of football every day, are they? They're doing drills, they're doing isolation, they're doing things like that. And, that's what takes people to the next level. And like from our kind of circles of jiu-jitsu, like Danaher, you listen to how they do stuff. There is a lot of kind of breaking a technique down and then isolating and then drilling that specific area. And that's because, that's how professional sports approach it. Just playing a full game of rugby every single day, you'd be crippled. But you've seen that as well, right? You've seen people get injured. You hear about it all the time. Like, I think there are times and places for that sort of thing. But again, as you go through your jiu-jitsu journey, you don't need to spar crazy 5 days a week, do you? You know what that feels like. It's beneficial for people who are maybe just coming through and, just starting to look at competitions and jumping on the mat. But yeah,
I was having that very conversation with someone you might know him, Mudde.
Yeah, I know Muddy very well.
Everyone knows Mudde.
Great example. I like Muddy. Like, he's a nice guy.
He's changed though. He genuinely changed. Because I remember, just like you, he had a reputation. Every round was a nightmare.
I've had some rounds with Muddy.
100%. He's changed very much now, and now he's very much of like, I'm working something. And when someone comes up to him who's that all aggressive type, he's not interested. He's like, I've been on these mats too long. I've had too many of them rounds. I'm working something. So if you want to work this, Right? Whatever it is, guard passing, sweeps, if you want to work this, cool, let's work this. If you want a full out round, there's a gym full of people. Just go find someone else. So and I think it's also the older you get, you kind of understand a little bit, like, you know what I mean? I can't do too many of them mad people hanging off my arms and my legs. We don't recover as fast.
And sometimes I don't think it promotes good technique either. I think, you know, sometimes the reason things are successful is because you're relying on, you know, speed and attributes like that. And it sounds like the old school hippie BJJ, like, oh, just use leverage and, you know, blah blah blah, and all that. We all turn Brazilian again because we're no longer Japanese. But I think for me, like, I've had those awful rounds, and like I've had some rough rounds with Muddy over years. Like if Muddy came into the gym now, I'd be like, dude, I would have that talk with him, like, just chill. Like no one needs that. It's great to hear he's kind of he's come over to the dark side of being an older man now with us. But yeah, I think I don't think some of the social media stuff helps. And jiu-jitsu, we sell a dream, don't we? Like we're pretty much selling holidays when we sell jiu-jitsu. We're selling like you're going to be a jiu-jitsu badass. You know, you're going to learn how to do this and do that. And in reality, like, it's miserable. For the most part, it's miserable. You get these little sort of bits of hope every now and again where something works really well, and, you know, it all flows and it's super nice. But, you know, it's tough. It's hard. You know, your ego is getting broken down all the time. You know, Steve Murgatroyd's best line I've ever heard in my life. Steve Murgatroyd, you know, one of our brown belts, lovely guy. I've known him for years, and, you know, his quote was, "Jiu-jitsu, you never truly enjoy it." But like, if you kind of go back and kind of think about the moments on the mat and stuff like that, where you've got some young upstart kind of just crushing your soul because they've just flown round your guard, even though you've done guard for 20 years, you know, like you can get into that kind of mindset. But after you finish training and after, you know, you've all given each other a hug and stuff like that, you know, you've done something hard, and that's the important bit. Like, it's getting outside of that off that couch, you know, being able to walk home because, you know, no one's trying to kill you, rip your knees off and stuff like that. I think it might be more of an old guy thing. I think it'd be interesting to see, you know, as you interview kind of maybe some of the younger guys, what their thoughts are. I've not caught Roberto's yet, but it'd be interesting to see kind of Roberto's point of view on this, because he's similar sort of age and we've all kind of known each other for a long time. So yeah.
So one of the interesting thing, I think it was one of the Gracies was saying, and he was getting his older students was complaining that this young guy came and he passed in his guard and did it and all this stuff. And one of his advice, which was, it took me back a bit, it was like, yeah, but you were able to be on the mat with the younger guy. Yeah. Like, if you didn't have your BJJ black belt, you wouldn't have stood a chance. It wouldn't have been a fight. Right. But at least you put up some resistance. And I think that's one of the things for the older guys to just think about it. Like, you don't need to go toe to toe with this 17-year-old guy who's a competitive blue belt who's trying to rip everyone up. Like, sometimes just being able to stay in the fight, that's enough sometimes.
I couldn't agree more. And I think the problem with men, regardless of what age you are, you're a 14-year-old boy. Yeah. You have the mindset of a 14-year-old boy. When we do anything like sport, we forget we're directors, we forget we're teachers, we forget we've got these really important sort of jobs outside, and we become a 14-year-old boy, and we refuse to acknowledge we're 43 with 24 years of jiu-jitsu injuries. Yeah. And that's the problem, and it's difficult. Like, I still have those moments where you're like, you know, you get frustrated because, you know, like, your knee doesn't quite go as high as it used to go and stuff like that. But you have to kind of put it into perspective of kind of where you are in your life, where they are in their life, and just accept it. And I think that's difficult, and I struggle with it now. But that's something I say to people, like, you know, don't let your ego kind of spoil jiu-jitsu. and that's the biggest issue that we've got with coaching kind of older athletes. Now, when I go with younger people, who I think are really explosive, I don't play around. I go half guard, so I limit the amount of damage that they can do because I can hang on to one leg pretty good. Their ability to now flip and do stuff like that. I was talking to someone just before Christmas, and he got caught with again some guy who was a white belt, but doing like rolling omoplatas and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, right, I do. Yeah, okay, dude. But I'm just like, yeah, anyone like that, if I don't know them, and I've done like a little bit of a breakdown from when I roll with a new guy, and like I just pull half guard, play from there, see what they're doing. Are they establishing certain positions? And then that gives me an indicator where they are on the jiu-jitsu journey without being in a position where I'm now getting hurt. Yeah, and that's it. And headbutts as well, like, and again, it's because they don't understand the game. They don't understand how to keep posture. So like when you're breaking their posture and they're constantly hitting you in the head, like it's your fault because you're breaking the posture. You've not told them to frame and do things like that. So yeah, I think if I'm going to say anything to kind of older guys is just let the ego go, and just what else you're going to do like on 7:00 on a Wednesday. Like, it's not good on TV. You might as well come do jiu-jitsu and just chill out and just have some fun.
Spen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Any last shout outs, anything you want to mention, anything like that?
So thanks for having me. Obviously, it's it's lovely to come down to your academy finally, and for me, like, thanks to my wife Marie. She's my absolute rock, and she puts up with a lot of my nonsense, but supports me as well through everything that we do together. The guys that coming to SBG Bradford and like Danik and Stewie and Steve and people like that, like having those guys to roll was really good. Thanks to Mal for Kudo, bringing Kudo into my life, and just SBG, for all their continued support. And God, it sounds like an Oscar. Thank you, doesn't it? I don't want to miss any of Bradford Judo as well. Bradford Judo, for helping me with that, and just being patient with my lack of my Bambi style judo at the moment. But there's so many people. But yeah.
So now you're training on Tuesdays and Thursdays up at
Planet Fitness.
Planet Fitness.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the classes, where can they, if they want to get information on classes and stuff?
Yeah, sure. BradfordMMA.com. We do jiu-jitsu 6 till 7:30, and then Kudo, which is again kind of like a Japanese style of MMA. Trying to make it a little bit more easier for anyone to come and join and have fun and still get that kick, punch, itch, and maybe the occasional headbutt as well. But don't forget, obviously game fight as well. This guy's doing some fantastic stuff for people in Bradford. Lovely academy as well, so make sure you get down and come and see Barbara as well.
Should we get it rolling?
Let's
do it.
Oh. 15 minutes later, right?
I don't know whose knees they were. So that's 5 minutes. We can